We're getting started. I'm here if our student team is ready to go. Hi, everyone. Again, we're just waiting for our student team to be ready with their presentation. Just please bear with us. Okay, and I've just heard that they are ready to go. So, a very important outcome of this conference for Professor LaRue, Professor Davies, and I was increasing the scholarship on print in South Africa. And I think this morning we've already heard about how additional materials can help elaborate and expand on the stories of marginalized people whose histories haven't really been recorded and haven't really been shared. So as a part of this and in support of this, we have a presentation from the archives that have agreed to be a part of this conference that have print holdings, which are, I don't want to forget anybody, Amazwi, UNISA, Constitution Hill Trust Archives, the UP Special Collections, the WITS Historical Archives. The students have prepared a presentation from them, and then we do have all of the archivists in our chat for a live Q&A afterwards. So Annika, I think we can start.
Move on to the questions. So question one, what are your collections of print materials?
The print materials that are available at UNISA are primary and secondary material. The materials archival collection that consists the nature of uniqueness, rare, unpublished. And the secondary materials are materials that are published, such as books that are rare, out of print, and very expensive. And some of the collections that are available include UNISA Archives collection. This is, as we are UNISA Academic Archives, the main purpose or the main focus is more of preserving UNISA history. So we have the print materials for universities administration, staff, students, the functions, and the history and development of UNISA. We have the collection of Documentation Center for African Studies. This is a collection that is that has historical and contemporary print materials concerning the Black, mixed race Indian communities in South Africa. Materials include AWD champion, DC Maribate, DT Jabafu, ZK Matthews, and so on. We also have the German collections, which is the Hesse collection of German Afrikaner. The the collection has publications and original manuscripts initiated by the late Dr. Hesse, who was a lecturer in German at UNISA. So the collection contains published works, include many valuable reflecting the German contribution to South African culture, such as travel stories, missionaries, literature, Bible stories, and so on. We also have manuscripts collections. We call it manuscripts because it is made of various collections. The collection contains the historical, cultural, and research materials of individuals and organizations. And the collection includes what we call LF Main Guard. That's it contains the documents of in fact, what I'm saying is that it has the original documents of Khoisan languages, literacy collection, music collection, Anglo-Boer War collections, and so on. We have United Party collections. United Party collections contain print archives of South African political party, which ruled South Africa for 38 years. So materials contain valuable pamphlets, posters, and newspapers cutting from the major newspapers in the country. So we also have the collection of Frederick Wagner collections, which comprises books, pamphlets, art, prints, manuscripts about the lives of the people of the country. And many of the works dated from 17th century, 18th to 19th century. This collection provides researchers with information about the discovery of the first settlements. We can talk about early expeditions into the interior, development of Africans and historical, and so on. We also have W.A. Joubert collection of old legal sources. So this collection contains legal print materials in Latin and Dutch, which are still important works of reference for South Africans legal scholars that consist legal published before 1800. So we also have the reprints of legal sources published before 1800, and those materials are rare and very valuable legal sources. We also have the print collection of cathedrals collections. So this the bookstock of the libraries represent the Anglo-Catholic interest of the bishops. We also have Desmond T. Cole collections, which contains books, manuscripts, magazines, journals on variety of subjects, including history, religion, psychology, education, and botany. Most of the items are on South African languages. This is good about these collections. We also have Kenneth S. Beach collections that contain the sketches and the publication dealing with the rise and maturity and decline of 5 great civilizations over 4,500 years. The publication on Egyptians, Mesopotamian, Persian, and Greco-Roman civilizations. We also have the print materials of UNISA thesis and dissertations. Also, we have children collections that are the publications, the old books of children, the publication of children. So these are the few print collections that we have at UNISA Archives. I thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to question 2. Could you describe one of your collections that might be of interest to researchers of print culture?
Oh, wonderful. We have the collection of Van Schaik. It is called JL Van Schaik Africana. This collection has more than 5,000 items, and then it has been donated to UNISA Archives in 1965 by well-known Pretoria publisher and bookseller, Mr. Van Schaik, who has been described as one of the country's most important African collectors. He collected over a period of almost 50 years. It is a great, the collection has a great research value, covering the disciplines of history, languages, literature, theology, and art. So its special feature is the many early editions of the first Afrikaans language movement. Mr. Van Wyk played a great part in fostering Afrikaans as a language, and he valued the early Afrikaans writings, mainly published in pamphlets form and therefore almost unobtainable nowadays, which means those materials are very rare nowadays. So the collection also contains many fine examples of travel descriptions of the early voyagers and naturalists, the earliest of which is Lonanis of, it's called Leonis Africae of 1632. And also the collections contain art books, including those on Bushman paintings and rock engravings. This reflects the donor's special interest in South African cultural affairs. So apart from the books that this collection has, it also contains rare editions of periodicals, newspapers, pamphlets, and programs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Question 3, what services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
Oh, the archivists assist clients to find information that they are looking for. This entails catalog. I will say catalog because we fall under library. So we use catalog to search archival information. So we assist the researchers with searches so that they can select the most relevant inventories. So materials from the storage from the compactors area are retrieved and presented to the clients. Hence, the clients must perform their own research. So we have the limited photocopying and high resolution imaging of some information. So some of the information may be done by request. Clients may access the hard copy documents and special book collection on site in the archives reading room on Monday until Friday from 8 o'clock to 4 p.m. So this time excludes public holidays, and appointments must be made in advance via email at avd@unisa.ac.za. We also provide the service of digital preserved archives. So digital collections may be accessed 24/7 online at UNISA Library digital. Okay, digital collections. So the link is there. So apparently, these collections, up to this far, we have only 4 collections there that includes UNISA Archives. We also have digital materials for Thabo Mbeki. We also have the UNISA Gallery collections. So these are the services that UNISA Archives provides for the users. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4. What, in your opinion, is the value of studying print archives in South Africa?
Well, in print archives, it is easier to determine the context of a specific piece of correspondence due to the physical arrangement of the documents which are present in the same file. I can talk about the size, color, type of paper on which the information was written, can also assist a researcher in better understanding the provenance of the document. Hence, the information, whether it was a simple copy typed with tracing paper, or whether it was monogrammed, stationery of quality with a 9-ink stamped seal embedded in the paper, the quality of the way that a book has been bound, either with leather or other materials, and the end paper designs also give a clue as to the understanding of the publication at a particular historical time. These elements do not find a true reflection in digitized version of the same material. Very often, magazines and newspapers clips can be found in between the printed material, which will also be scanned and displayed in the digitized version due to the copy legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. On to my last question, question 5. Who is the contact person for researchers, and are there any special restrictions in light of the COVID pandemic?
Visitors at UNISA Archives, Muklinek campus, are required to complete the Higher Health Check app on their mobile devices to show their COVID symptoms clearance certificate at the security entrance checkpoint to campus. Appointment must be done in advance with the manager, Andri van der Westhuizen, to view the material in the reading room. So apparently only 2 researchers are allowed at the same time due to physical distance restrictions, wearing of masks, and compulsory sanitizing of hands are enforced. Due to the fragile condition of material, photocopying will not be allowed. Researchers are advised to bring along cameras to take images of the pages which they may want to refer to later. I thank you.
Move on to the questions. So question one,
All
what
right.
are your collections of print material?
Good afternoon, Ms. Hoare. My name is Jade. Before we start with the questions, will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the university's archives?
Okay, great. I'm Nikki Hoare. I'm the coordinator of the Special Collections Unit here at University of Pretoria. I've been the coordinator since 2016, so it still feels relatively new to me. And I think you can imagine with the type of collections that we've got, I'm learning something new every day. A little bit of background about the collections. So we began as an Afrikaner collection in the 1930s and slowly grew, including various different types of collections, private collections. The Afrikaner collection is still the biggest collection that we've got. And that's the one that we basically continuing to develop. Some of our smaller collections, which I'll speak about, are basically closed collections because they were donated as a whole by private individuals. So a very brief outline of what we have. Our African heritage collections include our very large Afrikaner collection, the De Villiers Roos collection, which includes everything from literature to Afrikaner, the Du Plessis collection, which is mainly Afrikaner, and there's a theology collection as well. We've got a South African music collection, and we are trying to develop our struggle history collection at the moment that consists mainly of documents collections, which I'll also speak about in a little while. We've got a number of smaller collections, but it's something that we're actually still working through as well. Those are mainly documents collections that have been stored in boxes that need to be properly inventoried at the moment. We've also got rare books and our UP collection. So the rare books includes the Gerians collection. That's mainly literature. We've got a lot of old literature in that collection. Things like, I think it's a second edition Jacques of the Bushveld. We've got Jules Verne in French, a wonderful 3-volume edition of that. I think it's the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The reserved collection, it's basically things that are of value, whether it's because of the information they contain or because they've got specific antiquarian value, and also high-risk books. Our oldest and our most valuable books come from this collection. UP Publications is all the research that is published by the University of Pretoria. So we collect, as far as we can, everything that is published either by the university as a whole or by researchers at the university, departments of the university. We try to keep preservation copies of all of that. And then our Netherlands Cultural History Collection, which is a huge Dutch collection that also needs to be worked through. But we do have some of the only copies of specific books in that collection. And then our theology collections, I mentioned the Du Plessis collection, and we've got various other ones. We do have quite a lot of theology researchers coming to work through those collections. just for interest's sake, this is our oldest book, published in 1491, and it's still in really good condition. And again, our most valuable book is the first edition, Copernicus, which I'm very, very proud of. I think that is that's the book collections. We've got various document archives, and I've just put a very brief summary of 3 of them here. We are trying to get a lot of our document archives available on our institutional repository as well. The ones that I've mentioned here, it's the de Villiers-Ruiz Personal Archive, the proceedings of the Delmas treason trial, that one's available on UP Space, and the Van Muller collection, which I'll speak about a little bit more later on, I think. I think that's quite an extensive background. It's probably more information than you wanted.
That's no problem, Ms. Hall. I'm going to get to the questions now. So I think you pretty much answered this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
No, go ahead.
What are your collections of print materials?
So yeah, that's very much what I've just gone through, and it includes publications, so it's book collections as well as archival collections. We generally tend to focus on published materials, and it's not specific stuff. So anything that has got to do with the University of Pretoria staff or departments or anything like that goes to the UP archives. The only University of Pretoria things we concentrate on is the publications again, and that's the what we call the TUK collection, the Tikiana collection. So we focus mainly on published materials. As I said, our Africana collection is the biggest collection that we've got, and that focuses mainly on any field of research within sub-Saharan Africa. So it's science, history. Obviously, it's most of our collections fall within the humanities, but we do have something almost for every field. And as I said, our documents collections are relatively small. It's not really what we focus on, but we do have some interesting documents as well, including, as I mentioned, the Van Muller, which is a very important document collection, and then a few more political things like the Delmas treason trial.
Okay, thank you. Question 2, could you describe one of your collections that might be of interest to researchers of print culture?
Yes, I have got a slide for that. Let me just get there. Okay, so specifically what I wanted to mention here is the Van Muller collection. This is almost 100 boxes of, I think we're heading at about 600 manuscripts. And it's manuscripts on the various indigenous cultures within South Africa. What's interesting about this collection is it's information basically about the lifestyle of the people. So it includes everything: traditions, way of life, medicine. There is information on music. So basically anything that you can think of that has got something to do with the way people live, this collection has got information on it. And the most interesting thing is these manuscripts were created from interviews that were done. The interviews were undertaken by Black people within the communities. It was mainly teachers or professional people, but they were specifically tasked with interviewing people within their own communities about the way of life of the specific communities. This collection has been held now, I think it was donated over 50 years ago, and it's been relatively inaccessible because it is in each indigenous language. The interviewers wrote down the proceedings of the interviews, and they were then transcribed into a typewritten document. And what we've managed to do now is we've got SA Heritage Publishers has started a project where they are translating all of the manuscripts into English. and then producing publications from that to make the information more available. So what is the most interesting for print culture with the Van Warmelo is that it's recorded history that would otherwise not have been recorded. You know, these are the people whose history would have been ignored otherwise. It's not history that would have been chosen to be included with the governments of the day. So it's really, really down to earth community history. And everything was recorded in the dialect that was used at the time. And what some of the translators are finding is they're having difficulty understanding the old dialect because that's already died out. So it's a sort of a language study as well as a history study that's I think going to provide a lot of research material for many years to come. And then another one that I wanted to mention specifically because it's very tangible is the Huisgenoot collection. So this is a collection from the very first issue in 1916, going up to we're still collecting today. So it really would show a timeline of print culture going from the beginning of the 20th century up to today, how actual printing techniques have changed, and also things like advertising, what articles were focused on. I think, I mean, anything, it's difficult to pick two from the special collections. Everything that we have is of interest to researchers of print culture, but those are two that I definitely would like to highlight.
Thank you. Question 3. What services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
Okay, so this is a very basic outline of how our collections can be accessed. We want to make our collections as accessible as possible to whoever is interested in the information. Obviously, it's easier for University of Pretoria student staff and researchers to come into our special collections. The material isn't allowed to be taken out, so everything has to be used within the reading room. But we are also working on having as much as we can be digitized and made available online. So depending on copyright limitations, if it can go online, we're doing that. We've got a growing collection of Afrikaner books specifically, and a lot of our documents collections, like the Van Warmelo and the Delmas Trees and Trial collections, are available online. But for researchers that are outside the university, it's really just a matter of contacting us. Sometimes we were able to assist without the person coming in, and sometimes they want to come and work with the actual material. The only restriction, as I said, is none of the material can be taken out. It has to be used in the reading room.
Thank you. Question 4. What, in your opinion, is the value of studying print archives in South Africa?
Well, this is obviously a sort of a personal passion of mine, being as I work with these books every day. But the thing is obviously history is recorded in print. So that's the way that we access the past primarily. But it's not just the information or the text of the book that is of importance. The materiality and the physicality of the book, or even documents, letters, so on, can give us so much additional information about the culture and the time that produced it. Specifically with South Africa's political history, print culture can provide surprising or unexpected insights into the development of what history was shared, what history was written down, how that's changed. And I think it's, you know, with everything going digital, I don't think it's going to be everything that is digital today is not as permanent. I don't think there's a way to make it as permanent as print culture is. I think it's vital that we keep looking at these resources in different ways, and realizing that really they are invaluable, not only for historical research, but cultural research. There's just sort of no limit to what these resources, the information that they can provide.
Thank you. Question 5. Who is the contact person for researchers, and are there any special restrictions in light of the COVID pandemic?
Right, that would be me. So anybody's welcome to contact me, either by phone or by email. And the only restrictions for COVID that we've got at the moment, look, the library is opening up more and more all the time. Currently, the main thing that we've got in place is social distancing. So masks are mandatory. We've got sanitizers all over the library and within special collections. And then we're trying to limit the numbers of people that are coming in. Unfortunately, it's sort of not a high traffic area, so we don't generally have to kick people out. But really, social distancing is the main thing that we've got in place at the moment.
Well, that is all. Okay, so question 1, what are your collections of print materials?
So the reason that I provided this image to you is that you can get an impression what we hold. It's everything but the kitchen sink, we always say. It's more than 3,400 collections in various formats, and you get an idea through this image. Printed, handwritten, in all kinds of other formats. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then my next question. Could you describe one of your collections that might be of interest to researchers of print culture?
One of our quite outstanding collections is that of Nat Nakasa, his papers, and you know that he founded the Classic magazine. That magazine was founded in 1963, it ran up to 1970. Nat Nakasa, of course, left the country and died a tragic death in the US. So in that Classic magazine, you had all kinds of writers who of the time, from Ken Tember to Cassie Mozizi. Those are the drum writers, of course, Etienne Patlele, and many others. So it is quite an outstanding magazine, very rich in its nature, and a wonderful item to have as an archive. You won't find it in many places anymore.
Thank you. Question 3. What services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
So as a research archive, we are, of course, trying to guide our researchers to navigate our finding aids, which is a very important entry point to any archive. We are pointing them towards suitable collections according to their research topic, and obviously then provide the material to them. We also offer services in limited, but our main focus is on advising researchers in their endeavors here in the archive, working with primary material.
Thank you. Question 4. What, in your opinion, is the value of studying print archives in South Africa?
Well, I wouldn't say only in South Africa, but print archives are, of course, a very rich source for research. Apart from publications such as the Classic and other very rare and small publications that you wouldn't find, and in many libraries they run under ephemerals or grey literature and get lost in the holdings. we as archives value them in a very different way, and other, for example, very rich sources are newspaper cuttings. We have 2,000 boxes of newspaper cuttings, which is a kind of methodology that used to be exercised in libraries at some stage, to cutting out newspapers and then sort them according to subject matter, which some material, like that, it's extremely rich in information going back, and it's easy accessible rather than plowing through newspapers, for example. And yeah, so print archives, not only in South Africa, are indeed a very rich source for research.
Thank you. And then my last question, question 5. Who is the contact person for researchers, and are there any special restrictions in light of the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, we have a website on the WITS content management system where we can be found, wits.ac.za historical papers. And at the moment we are only 2 archivists, and our details are provided there, as well as on our digital repository that we have. At the moment we are we've got a small reading room, which is cozy, but at the moment we are trying to restrict our numbers of researchers to around about 3 to 4 at a time. But it will open up soon, and we will get back to our usual numbers of around about 9, 10, 12 researchers in our reading room. It gets very full at times, and colleagues exchange ideas and so on. So the time will come when we can lift those restrictions on about 4 researchers. Other than that, we have no restrictions at the moment. We are an open access archive, a public archive. Anybody can just walk in.
Questions. So question 1, what are your collections of print materials?
Our collections, when you describe print materials, we hold digital collections. Some of the collections are physical print collections. Should I detail all of them?
If you would like to, you can.
Okay, I think I gave an example that some of the work that we do is in partnership with NASA, the National Archive and Record Service of South Africa. We have other partners. If I talk of print materials, we have a collection which relates to the history of Constitutional Hill, the Fort Prison, the evolution of the site of Constitution Hill. We have collections, the one which I don't want to run ahead of myself, but you asked which collection was particularly interesting, and one of those is the collection relating to the public participation process in the Constitution. We also have collections which include the papers and memoranda of individuals who were role players in the Constitution making process.
Thank you. Okay, so question 2. Could you describe one of your collections that might be of interest to researchers of print culture?
Yeah, the example that I want to introduce is named the Shalala Skalchen Public Participation Collection. Edward Shalala was the head of the Community Liaison Department of the Constitutional Assembly, and Sinova Skalchen is an author who conducted research into the public participation processes which underpinned the making of our Constitution. So after Sinova Skalchen submitted her thesis to the Department of Political Studies at UCT, and she published a book, and she and Edward Shalala offered their papers to Lawrence Siegel of the Constitution Hill Trust, and the collection was formally donated in October 2019. Some of the papers are duplicated in other collections, but our holdings of those physical papers are framed by the context of the collection assembled by a specific role player, which is Edward Shalala, as the head of that community liaison department, which was tasked with implementing the public participation process. Why it's interesting, South Africa's constitution is celebrated internationally, especially on account of the processes which went into its making. But how thorough was that public participation? Is the process one which could guide other countries as they enter processes of drafting or making constitutions? We can't preempt those answers, but researchers and others will surely find clues in a collection such as the Shalala Skelton Public Participation Collection.
Thank you. Okay, question 3. What services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
Jade, can I take that back? Can I just rewind to question 3, just to speak a little bit more on what's in that collection, or?
Yes, if you would like to, I'll go back.
Yeah, I think just to say what the collection includes, just to give examples. It includes memoranda, it includes press clips, it includes documents of an administrative nature, for example, budgets pertaining to travel and logistics. And I've personally found quite interesting as I looked through it, there are reports of attendance at community public meetings from Saldanha Bay through to Paarl, from Standerton to Klerksdorp. And we also find in this collection the link between the public participation and how that went back to the Constitutional Assembly. So, for example, we find a document which is a briefing to the Constitutional Assembly Theme Committee from a meeting held in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape in June 1995. So they're very interesting linkages and relationships about public participation, which are contained within this collection. Are you still there?
Yes, I was just making sure that that you've said everything that you want to say. May I now move on to question 3?
So, sorry, are you asking another question?
Oh, yes, we're moving on to question 3. What services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
Okay, unfortunately, at the moment, we don't offer services. We are moving towards a point where we will have the physical space to be able to serve researchers. But at the moment, we have a small team of 3 people, and we are engaged in digitizing and structuring the collections, augmenting the metadata, etc. So our primary platform and our primary objective is to make the materials available online, and that researchers will be able to access them in a meaningful way online.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to move on to question 4. What, in your opinion, is the value of studying print archives in South Africa?
Sure, that's a big, it's a big question. I think print materials give a time stamp or a shot or a window of the subject which they're recording at a particular moment in time. And for us, in trying to represent the constitution making process, the print materials that we hold allow for reconstruction of the timelines, the veracity of statements, the ability to rewind and see through a prism at a particular moment in time, a process, in our case, the constitution making process. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Answered perfectly. Okay, can I move on to the last question?
Sure.
Question 5. Who is the contact person for researchers, and are there any special restrictions in light of the COVID pandemic?
Okay, at this point, we do not have a designated contact person for researchers. We in transition and a young organization. When our website with the archival material goes online, contacts will absolutely be listed there. COVID has certainly been a factor because we've been working primarily remotely, but at the moment, as at May 2022, we have just started to set up a physical space on Constitution Hill. Again, that has been impacted by COVID, and for most of the past 2 years, we have been working remotely and online. I'm going to be speaking
Okay, thank you, Jade.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Warren. My name is Jade. Before I start with the...
Okay, so focusing on, as I say, our collections are quite broad, but looking particularly in terms of print materials, we have quite a large collection of publishers' archives. And this includes large well-known publishers such as Ad Donker, David Phillip, Jacana, Quella, Raven Press, but also smaller publishers. We have material relating to places like Buchu Books, Carrefour Press, Ocean Books. We've recently received some material from Uhlanga. We also have collections relating to the small literary journals. So we have full runs of most of the journals, which is quite important as some of them had very small print runs and ran for a few years and then stopped. We also have archival material related to journals such as New Coin, Contrast, Upstream, Staff Rider, and items like that. And again, the collections will include correspondence with authors. There might be manuscript drafts, typescript proofs, and also sort of sometimes artifacts like artworks or awards, or sometimes, I mean, we've even had people giving us the contents of their desk. And so it means we have things like, Olive Schreiner's pen that she used. And so we have some quite interesting extra material. We also have a satellite to the Eastern Star Gallery, and that houses exhibits of 19th century printing equipment and an exhibition that examines the history of the press in South Africa. So we also look at printing and at press history and background as well.
Thank you. I will move on to question 2. So question 2, could you describe one of your collections that might be of interest to researchers of print culture?
Certainly. I thought one which I know gets used quite a lot and is, I think, quite important is the Raven Press. So as many of you might know. So Raven Press were established in 1972, and in the 1990s were then absorbed into one of the bigger publishers. And they were an anti-apartheid oppositional publishing house. And we hold quite a large collection, which includes correspondence with authors. There are drafts of different versions of the books, publicity brochures, and some of the authors who are represented in this collection, because they published some quite major authors in the 1970s and 80s. People like J.M. Coetzee, they published J.M. Coetzee's first few novels. So they also produced Staff Rider. But then authors such as Mputuzeli Machoba, Peter Wilhelm, Mike Nicol, Yvonne Burgess, Christopher Hope, Faisal Johannesa, Lewis and Corsi are just some of the authors who are represented in that collection. And so, it's particularly when you have an author whose material might be housed in a different institution, sometimes even a different country. So sometimes getting material via their publisher means that we do have archival material that can be quite useful.
Can I move on to question 3?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so question 3. What services do you offer for researchers interested in using your archives?
Okay, so we provide access to a range of almost levels of interest. So we have a permanent exhibition, which anyone is welcome to come and visit. And our exhibition is called Voices of the Land, and really looks at almost a history of South Africa as portrayed in the literature. So, which includes sort of narrative and information as well as objects on display. And that exhibition includes a section on, it's called The Writing Life, which looks specifically at printing, publishing, the writing process. And so that can be of interest to just general visitors as well as sort of scholars. But then we realize that researchers often are doing more in-depth. And it is quite interesting looking at the program. I see several names of people who've actually done research at Amazwi. So we have a reading room where people who visit the museum to undertake research can work. And we have a quite detailed and extensive database. So all the material that comes in is catalogued in quite a lot of detail. So people can find what they're looking for and can undertake research here, working with the archival material. And for those who aren't able to travel, and we all know travel has been challenging in the last few years, so we do also offer long distance research. So researchers can contact us and we can then send them. So if one says, wanting to do research on ocean books, we can do a search, see what we have on this collection or on a particular author, and we can send a database search saying this is the material that we've got, and depending on what it is, people can then come back and we can then copy material and email it. So even if a researcher is not able to come to Makanda, we can provide access to the collections.
Thank you. Question 4. What, in your opinion, is the value of studying print archives in South Africa?
Okay, so I think print archives, as much as any of the other archives that we hold, give researchers valuable information about printing history, about literary history of South Africa. And one of the things that can be quite interesting is that the publisher's archive can provide, or the print archives can provide information that we might not otherwise have. So there might be authors who we don't necessarily have a collection from them, but there is correspondence with their authors. So for example, David Phillip has a whole lot, an extensive correspondence. Raven Press has extensive correspondence with J.M. Coetzee about his earliest books. And, you know, we've used this quite substantially in our recent exhibition on J.M. Coetzee. So that archive was able to give us information. Some of the things that can be found in the print archives as well is the different versions that have appeared. So one can trace the history of a work, looking at the corrections, what was changed, when did different versions come out. You can get a real sense of the publishing history by seeing which publishers were active. And we're already seeing some of the publishers, you know, from the 70s or 80s. If you ask someone now, you know, about them, they might say Ocean. What was Ocean? And the archives then trace that background, that history. We also have a large collection around the various literary journals. And this also enables researchers to trace what was happening in publishing, in the literary journals, but also to see who was being published. Very often that will provide the first publication of many writers who went on to become quite significant. They might have first published a poem in contrast in the 60s, and this was their first publication, and now they're very well known. But so it gives information into the early history of many authors, and also in terms of if you is studying a particular author, you can find a lot of information spread maybe across the archives. And if one is studying a particular publisher, there will be a lot of information. And as mentioned, I mean, it was good to see so many familiar names of people who have done research. And so we get a lot of people, particularly Raven and David Phillip collections. They are regularly researched, but there's also material which it enables a researcher to do primary research. So you're not just having to rely on what previous critics have written about. The researchers are then able to go back and look at the correspondence, look at the publishing history. And we're looking at increasingly the study of sort of book history to know things like the different covers, why cover was selected, people who might be interested in the typesetting, the editing process. So there are many different aspects that can be studied by focusing on a print archive.
Okay, thank you. And now on to my last question, question 5. Who is the contact person for researchers, and are there any special restrictions in light of the COVID pandemic?
Okay, so I'm the main contact person, and so people can approach me, and then I will pass on the query to the curator who's best qualified to answer. So some things might go to the librarian, some might go to curators, and if someone asks and I know that a particular curator has been cataloging this collection, then we'll say, okay, you answer. So we have a general email which can also be used, which is info@amazwi.museum, or people can contact me at c.warren@amazwi.museum, and then we can just the curator will then follow up and assist the researcher. In terms of the COVID restrictions, yes, we do. It's always helpful as a researcher to contact the institution beforehand, because it does enable us to prepare better. So we do ask that people not just show up. So we need to book a space, because our reading room we can only be at 50% capacity. So we need to make sure that we've got enough space and that we're don't have too many people in the room at once. We're also trying to reduce the handling of documents, so to know in advance when someone is coming, so we can prepare, we can retrieve the documents and then let them stand overnight. So when the researcher comes in, they've just had a chance without being touched. And then, you know, there's a standard code restrictions of sanitizing your hands before you come in, wearing masks. I have my mask off because I'm alone in my office, but if we're, you know, we are still wearing masks, and we ask people, you know, if you're not well, please don't come to the museum. But we are open, and we have been for several, I mean, we've been open, I think, since we moved on to level 3. So the museum is open, and we are able to, you know, continue to assist researchers. People can also, if they want more information or to contact us, we do have a website. So if you just look for Amazwi, and we also have a Facebook page, so that one can also see what is happening and what we are doing. And both of those sources also give contact details. And yes, so we are looking forward to having more researchers visiting. Over the COVID period, of course, people have been traveling a lot less. So it is good to start seeing people in person.
Okay, great. Thanks so much to the team. I think we have run over our time, but I would still like to have space for questions and answers to our archives, and all of our archivists have joined us. So Leslie, I see that you have a question in the chat. I believe that's for Amazwi. Crystal, are you available?
Yes, hi there.
Hi.
Thanks, Leslie. I'm not 100%. We don't collect full runs of newspapers like something like Grocott's. You would probably find that possibly at the Corey Library at Rhodes University, because our focus is more on the literary aspect rather than the historical aspect. So we have some newspapers of the period, mostly those that had a strong component of creative writing in them, which is why we would have collected.
Thanks so much. And then I wanted to ask Heta's question from earlier today about whether or not the donation of private archives to institutional museums is sometimes destroyed for the sake of space. If anybody would like to volunteer themselves to answer that. Thanks. It has another question as well. So the UCT archives were invited, and I did speak to them, and they are hard at work digitizing as we speak, and they were unable to be here because of that. So I think there is more effort. I know that the University of Pretoria needs digitization. Is that something you would like to say more about?
Yeah, our digitization office is sort of trying to get very, very busy. We were actually, the digitization office was what was keeping the library going over the COVID period, because as people couldn't come in, the only way they could access sources from the library as a whole, not only special collections, was through the Digi office. So it's a very busy section of the library. It's running every day. There's a little bit of restrictions with regards to the them sort of on a continual basis to try and get as many of our collections that can go online. And at the moment, we're also looking at a different platform. What we're using at the moment is our institutional repository. So everything is going up on PDF, in PDF version. And we're looking at platforms where the user interaction can be a little bit more authentic, to host maybe not only print collections, but with very, very few of our collections, we've got some objects as well. So like, for example, we've got the Mimikutsa collection, which is mostly sheet music and things that Mimikutsa donated to us, but we've also got things like costumes and costume designs and her awards and that sort of thing. So we are looking at different platforms. At the moment, it's just UP Space, but we're working on it all the time.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Gabrielle at the WITS Historical Papers, I have a question for you. I was fortunate enough to read your article on the incorporation of the South African History Archives into the WITS Historical Papers collections. And in there, you specifically talk about the institution as a way to shape engagement and discourse with these archives in relation to community engagement or researchers. Would you like to say a little bit more about the incorporation of the South African Historical Archives and the meaning of that?
Yeah, Letitia, thanks. That has been a move a long way coming, actually, ever since Saha left. In the meantime, both of us, Saha as well as Historical Papers as Archive, we have gone our own ways, but we are actually very much intertwined in terms of our collections, our holdings, our interest, the scope, and the topic of what we speak to. And so with Saha returning to WITS, the university has taken on quite a huge responsibility in addition to our archives, because archives do need a lot of resources, as we all know. However, we have tucked them in. We have incorporated Saha in our what we call a multi-institutional repository based on an application called Atom. It's an archival application, and so our digital holdings are sitting tight in terms of not only finding aids but also digital objects. And so we are looking forward to new engagements with our ongoing partners. Both of us, Saha as well as Historical Papers, have always related and worked together with the WITS History Workshop, and those are historic connections. And so we are looking forward to new heights in that regard, and with them being on campus makes it much easier.
Thank you so much. I think that was very useful. Do we have any other questions from the audience that is not in the chat? We have posted the contact information of all of the archives that presents today, and we encourage you to get in touch with them if you are interested in any way in their collections, or if anything about this talk has sparked some interest for you. I know I have about 5 research topics for students already just coming out of here. There's a source from the WITS Historical Papers archivist, Gabrielle Mahale, that she shared with us on the use of archives. And I would like to also just ask our JCP team to share that in the chat. And then I think we're just going to have a quick 5-7 minute comfort break, and then the program will be moving on by 5 minutes. So we'll meet back here at 3:20. Thanks, everyone.